and meeting you guys and saying the prayer before us. A number of the things I want to talk about today are probably really obvious things that many of you guys have already experienced, but I think that as a professional consciousness coach, I want to share with you a little bit about the nonprofit that I work with, but I really want to give you guys a gift. I don't want to shortchange you. I want to share with you some things that you may already have experienced in your life, but maybe we've never put into words, so that when you leave this meeting today, you may not even be aware of it, but you'll be more empowered than you already are. Based on the age of the people in the group here, in my experience, I'm about 46 years old. Most of our things that help us to be better people are based on the experience that we've had, the experiences that we had. Experience can be a great teacher, can really wake you up, and our religious convictions and our belief in God is really a great thing that can enable us to do great things. So I just want to quickly speak about the Right Away Foundation and why that's so important to me and what I'm doing with that. It's a 501c3 nonprofit that I created last year, and I'm just now getting ready to start exposing people to. But having been through the prison system and having been through our justice system in the United States, I can talk hours and hours about that, but our justice system is really broken severely, and we have the highest rate of incarceration in the world. We have over 25% of the world's prisoners in our prisons in the United States, and this has really occurred just over the last 30 years. So we really have a crisis here. Now, I'm not for letting a bunch of criminals out of prison, but I've come to understand by going through the system that there are people who need to be in prison so that we're protected from them because they're genuine criminals. But unfortunately, I'm sad to say that based on my experience, most of the people that we have in prisons today are business owners and people that were targeted just because they broke the law. And really, prison is not the appropriate punishment for many of them, and many of them shouldn't have been charged criminally. But so we could go on and on about that. But what the Right Away Foundation, as a result of the overcrowding of prisons, especially federal prisons, you no longer have what you had in the 80s. I mean, many people's impression on the outside of prisons is that it's a luxury hotel where people are being fed and they all have cable TV. It's really nothing like that. It may have been that way at one point in time up to the 80s, but it's no longer that way at all. It's terribly overcrowded. There's no budget, barely enough budget for food. There's no budget at all for education. What education does exist in there is really a facade. It's just so they can say there is education in there. You can get your GED, and they have a lot of coursework that you can do on computers, but nothing to prepare you or to educate you to get any kind of to feed your mind, even in a positive way, other than the church and the chapels there. That can help you. When I was in prison, the only thing that I really found that was available to you by law, they have to cater to everyone's religious beliefs in prison. So they had a terrific religious library in there with all the different, religions I've never even heard of. They have books, videotapes, they have psychology videotapes from all the, even people like Tony Robbins and all that. So they have thousands of dollars worth of that kind of stuff. But unless you go and sit and engage with it, you're not going to get anything out of it. I decided when I was in there that I was going to read through all this material. I was just fascinated, So I'm a Christian, and I read the Bible many, many times in all the different versions when I was in there. You can read about the experience that I have on my website, the experience that I had when I was in there. But I read all the other religious works, the Quran, all about Buddhism and all about Rastafarianism and things I never even knew were a religion. And I learned a lot of amazing things. Really a lot of things that helped me as a Christian in my path. There's some utility in some of the belief systems of others. The utilities for us as Christians is what I would say. So I made a practice that I took meticulous notes, and being a professional coach before I went into prison, I helped people and their families cope with them being in there, and so I'm doing a series of writing about that. So I would encourage you, I've handed out these little pieces of paper just to make sure I don't shortchange you guys here. One of the things I did in taking all these meticulous notes and doing this real in-depth study of religion and psychology, I wanted to not just write about it when I come out. I learned some practices in there that really helped me as an individual, some utilities. But I wanted to walk out of there to be able to say, look, we live in a very fast-paced society. What can I give to people? What can I hand them to enable them to have a better experience of life based on all this research that I did when I was in there? And so I actually gave you guys a copy of this because I wanted to get it down in our fast-paced society that we live in, and just a few things you can carry around in your pocket. And I think that and I'll share these with you briefly. But to me, I think you'll recognize many of these things straight out of the Bible. And I'm trying to make this for anybody, though, of any religious background. But if I were to summarize the things that I walked away with in there so that I could give something to everyone else, these would be these rules. And I coach guys coming out of prison all the time, and the basis of that coaching is around these rules here. The first one is do what brings life and not what brings death. So in any decision-making process that you have, it's simple. Are you doing things that bring life for yourself and others, or are you doing things that bring death? There's really no in between. You're either decaying or bringing something negative in, or you're bringing something positive in. Okay? Forgive yourself and forgive others. Well, obviously Christ's entire most important message, right? Science nowadays is confirming what Christ has already been telling us for 2,000 years, and that there's a psychology around the art of forgiveness that is beneficial for not just the person being forgiven, but for your own self, so that you're not punishing yourself. Did you want to say something?
No, somebody just waved. I'm sorry.
Okay, sorry. Life, number 4, and this is, number 3. Life is a mission to overcome your own selfishness. One of the things that for me was the truth, and I'm not saying these are all, nothing I'm saying today, I'm not saying it's the definitive truth. I'm just saying for me it was the truth I discovered, and I like to share it because I think that there may be utility in it for people. Life is a mission to overcome your own selfishness. To me, what I learned most of all from studying all these things was that the word sin, you could replace it with selfishness every time, and it really for me unlocks a lot of the mysteries of the Bible. We have a selfish nature. It's been handed down to us from Adam and Eve, or whatever, however you want to look at it. But it is that selfish nature that defies God, that causes most of the chaos in our lives. And I'll talk to you more specifically when I hand you this tool I wanted to share with you today. Real simple understanding of it that can really help you in your walk as a Christian and other people that you can share it with. So I really believe that life is a mission to overcome our own selfishness. And the forgiveness part is about dealing with everyone else's selfishness. You got to recognize that we're all selfish and forgive them too. Life is literally how you choose to look at it. Well, I mean, that speaks for itself. If you look at the gurus and masters, what they really are, they're experts at managing their perception, the way that they look at life. And they have the ability to substitute bad thinking and bad behavior for better thinking, which leads to better behavior. So I'm going to give you a tool before we leave here that can really empower you to enable you to take the experience you already have and the good works you've already done and even take it to a higher level. And you can even share it with other people in a few sentences, and suddenly people click and they go, wow, I never thought of that, Number 5 here, you have the power to choose your behavior. This is a key thing, and I don't know that, for this group of men here, being that you have God as your guidepost and Jesus, I mean, obviously we prayed. I don't know what everyone's specific religious inclinations are, but it's such an important thing, and it can elevate you and cause you to continue to go into higher levels of consciousness your whole life. If you're comparing yourself and your actions to that of Jesus or God or for other people, maybe other masters, but if you're comparing yourself to a higher standard than you are, you're really on the right path, because of our selfish nature that we're saddled with, we're kind of injected into this thing, into life, and we got this body. It can do a number of wonderful, great things, but it's a double-edged blade, and you see this in a lot of things in life where there's great good. There's also a tool that can cause great good can also cause great damage and evil. And so by always comparing our own behaviors to that of Christ or whoever we were trying to model ourselves at, with the guys that I coach coming out of prison, I say, pick a hero. My hero is Jesus Christ. But for you, it could be Buddha, it could be some guy, a conglomeration of people that you see as heroes throughout history. Not this group, it's Jesus. Okay. yeah. But the point is that if you're not comparing yourself to a higher standard at all time, you're leaving your own decision making to your own faulty thinking and feeling, because our mind is subject to our body. And so that's what you see all the chaos out there, is people buying into the notion that their thinking and their feeling is always right. And that causes pure chaos, because the limited experience that one person has compared to 5 billion and everyone else that live is nonsense. It's nothing. It's not even the experience enough to know what difference between right and wrong. Okay? So if we're left to our own devices, we'll fail more often than not. So what is that all around? That's just around number 5. You have the power to choose your own behavior. So now we're getting into something that is a real gift to understand. And as a consciousness coach, I spend most of the foundation trying to convey this to people in a way. Let me just share with you a little bit about what consciousness coaching is and then touch on that. Consciousness coaching is a training I went through for 2 years. It changed my life. I was already a Christian, but it really super enabled me to become a better Christian. And all it really was a study of what it is to be a human being. You know, what is a human being? And a real close examination of that. And in looking at things, observing your own self and your own, becoming the observer of your own thinking and feeling. What consciousness coaching is, when I sit with people or couples and we do a session, it's not me telling you how to live. We have some tools and ideas that we share, and you can take them or leave them, and they're good things like the power of the word. You know, your words have power. Integrity, we talk about those tools. Integrity is a tool, doing what you say you're going to do by when you're going to do it, and maintaining the integrity of your word by making up for times when you don't do what you say you're going to do, how to recover from that. So there's a number of and many other tools of self-examination, but really a coaching session is about me just being a non-judgmental observer and sounding board and drawing out what is the real problems you're experiencing. And I don't even need to know anything about your specific businesses or whatever in order to help you to decide what courses of action you need to take. So it's a very powerful thing, and you don't need to be, it's not like psychology where you got to figure out the answer to the question why. You just pick up all your baggage and you just start to perform at a higher level. You know. So the only other thing you have to be cognizant after that is what higher level are you trying to perform at? In other words, who is your heroes? Who are you comparing yourself to? All right, so you have the power to choose your own behavior. Many of the people in this room may already know that. I can tell this by looking at all of you. You know it from experience, but you may have never articulated it and put it into words. I can tell you right now, 80% from my experience of the people that I meet have no idea that they actually have the power within them to make decisions and to do behaviors in spite of their own thinking and feeling. And that is a true powerful thing that a human being is gifted with from God. That power of choice is not some arbitrary thing that we should take lightly. You know, we see all the problems in the world, and many people are tempted to say, why doesn't God come in and where is God? And He gave us the power of choice. It's our choice to allow those things that offend us to exist. That's our choice. It's not God's choice. If He were to come in and meddle with everything, we would not have choice. We wouldn't need the power of choice. And I'm not saying this is true, but I've come to really view life as a contest or a process that God's putting us through to see what will we do? Will we choose God or not? You know, to me it's a theater. We're being tested in. That's just for me. But nonetheless, this power of choice, most people live their entire lives under the domination of their own lower consciousness, their thinking and their feeling. So in the few minutes that we have left, probably about 10 minutes or so, I just want to share a model of a human being that's true for anyone, regardless of your background, or at least it may not, I'm not saying it's the truth, it's the truth for me, and it may be true for y'all, maybe something, a common ground that we can talk about for a moment. So what is a human being? Well, let me ask the question another way. A human being, what is a good model of a human being? Well, a model for a human being is, that I think we can all agree on, is a mind, a body, and a spirit, or a higher consciousness. Okay, we have those components of ourselves. Many people live their entire lives subjugated by their feelings, their body. Okay, so if you take these three elements of a human being, mind, body, and spirit, let's look at the lowest level consciousness is that of our body. The body has its own consciousness. It has its own particular things it likes. The body, left to its own devices, wants only one thing. It just wants to feel good. And it goes about it in very strange ways. Sometimes it likes to be in sorrow. It actually prefers that because that's the lowest energy state you can be at, depression and sorrow. So it doesn't have to have a lot of energy to be in that energy state. But ultimately, it just wants to feel good at the end. It wants to have good sensations, which leads to, you know, all the kinds of addictions. People aren't addicted necessarily to sex or drugs or alcohol. They're addicted to feeling good, and they think that these are going to be short circuits. They're addicted to, they're living in the lowest level of consciousness, which is the physical being. The mind now has the ability to override the physical being. It can logic and reason things out and say, well, even though it feels good to eat ice cream, it tastes great on my tongue, it feels great, we cannot survive on living on ice cream alone, and so therefore the mind overrides that and says we're going to eat other things as well, even though it feels great to eat ice cream all the time. So the mind has a power associated with it, but the mind is the brain. And the brain being in the body is subject to the bodies. So you may have heard this, we all hear this thing, mind over matter. Well, that's great, except if you try to stay awake for 7 days without using any drugs, okay, you can make that decision. And you might do a real good job. Maybe you stay up 4 days. But ultimately, the mind is going to become subject to the body again, and you're going to go asleep, and the mind's going to turn off into a dream state. So the mind is limited. It's limited. The best the mind can do is force. It can use force to try, I'm going to stay awake. But force is limited. Not the force they talk about in Star Wars. They really mean to say power in that. They're mixing up the language. But that's what I'm talking about today. Let's talk about where power comes from. Power comes from the Spirit. It comes from the Spirit has conversations with other spirits in such a way that we're having a conversation spiritually right now. That we're not conscious of it in the mind and the body, because the mind and the body don't see the Spirit all the time. They experience the Spirit, but they don't necessarily see it. They're not even smart enough in many cases. When they do see the Spirit, then you have these epiphanies. You have these born-again experiences. You have these wow moments when all the mind and the body and the Spirit are aligned and they touch truth. You have these incredible experiences that people write books about and create churches around. Okay? And even those experiences can, while they can lead to great things in the world, they can also be limiting. Because the first thing we want to do as human beings when we have these great shifts of consciousness is we want to write them all down and share it with other people. But words are not enough to express the truth. And that's why the apostles in the Bible, they say you can't get to heaven by just obeying the laws, because the laws are man-made written things. And the truth is much bigger than we can put into words. And while it's good to have rules and things that you stand for, you got to understand that it's not everything. As human beings, words are a double-edged blade. They're very powerful, but they're not powerful enough in and of themselves to get to the higher levels of spirituality and connect with God. They're not enough. So, and it's good that they exist. Like many people can interpret the Bible a different way, but it's different for everybody because of where they're at. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a good thing. It's not a bad thing, because it can inspire people to continue to examine and continue to examine and continue to engage. If it was just a flat-out set of rules, we wouldn't have to keep reading it all the time. We just tattoo it to ourselves and function, But it doesn't work that way, right? The classic example of that is, the Nazis knock on your door and you're harboring Jewish people upstairs, and the Bible says don't lie. So what are you supposed to do? I can't lie. They're upstairs. I'm a Christian. You don't do that. We know that's not the right thing to do somehow, but yet there's rules and regulations that articulate that we're supposed to not lie. See, words aren't enough. They're just not enough to touch the face of God. So, but what we have is we have this incredible gifting, right? So we talked about the consciousness of the body. We talked about the consciousness of the mind. They have their own consciousnesses. They actually fight over dominance. Some people's fight is against the wills and the feelings of their body. They feel addicted to something, or they cannot control. Even Christ said when he cried at one time, I'm overwhelmed with emotion. Imagine people who are addicted are overwhelmed with emotion all the time. There's a way out. And many people live their entire lives, and they wake up in the morning and they may feel bad or good. No one's ever told them that they actually have the ability to change the way they feel. It's actually talked about in the Scriptures, and it's really simple. The Apostle Paul, and I don't always share the Scriptures with everyone in all my meetings because they're not all Christians, but in this group I feel comfortable to do that. The Apostle Paul, he says, what do you got to do? You got to think on that which is right, which is good. That's the process. That is how you get yourself back into alignment. Instead of thinking about what is negative and what is not bringing life, you can find whatever you're looking for. And if you dwell on negativity, you're going to find it. And you will go into a downward spiral. But if you think on that which is good, even when you feel like thinking on that which is bad, that's the trick. Where do you get the power to do that from? You get the power to do that from your own spirit or your higher consciousness. How do you do it? Thinking of the model of the human being as a mind and a body and a spirit, the first step in this process of being able to change your own behaviors. It's not about just changing. It's not about positive thinking. Positive thinking will get you nowhere. You got to be positive. You have to take positive action. How do you get yourself to do that when you don't want to? How do you recognize when you need to do that? Well, you may have friends that'll come up and tell you need to do this, But if you're not open to that suggestion, you might say, well, I'm not the type of person, I just can't do that. Okay? So what is it that's fighting these things, these road posts and signs that come to us? It is personality. So let's just break down what personality is right off the bat. Personality, I don't mean to dispel anybody because some of you probably have great personalities, but I don't mean to deflate it. But personality is nothing more than an idea. So we all have the same capabilities as human beings in this room. We all have hands and legs and arms, and we can do the same things. I can go to college, you can go to college, we can study the same thing. The only difference between us is this personality. But this personality, the entire thing, is nothing more than an idea. It is an idea about ourselves and who we are that we buy into and we reinforce every day by believing this is who we are. And we just take it at granted. Well, I didn't like the taste of that, so therefore I don't like vanilla, and that's the type of person I am, and that's just it. No other choices. Can't eat vanilla. No. You could actually change the way you feel about food if you set out to do it. You could actually change your palate. Okay? But most people don't know that. And the process of going and changing that root behavior, you can't necessarily change the onset of a feeling. Okay? You can't necessarily change thoughts that pop into your head. If you could, one of the things I love as a coach when we have a couples together is they go back and forth also, and one of them say, you shouldn't feel that way. I love that because, actually, let me share an insight with you. You're not the one that's in control of your feelings. The feelings just come automatically. If you could control how you feel, man, we'd have a heck of an experience in life, wouldn't we? Man, this is fantastic all the time. I don't need to do anything. I can just sit here. It's all great. It doesn't work that way. So it's not about being ashamed of how we feel or why do we feel a certain way. It's irrelevant. It's a matter of observing our feeling and then deciding what course of action we're going to take in light of those feelings. And sometimes taking action that is against our own feelings because we know it's counterproductive. And same thing with thinking. I challenge anybody in this room. I want to throw this out there. Your own thoughts you're not the creator of your own thoughts. I can tell you that from experience. You are not the creator of your own thinking. The thinking is going to come automatically all the time. You can choose sometimes what you want to think about. That's powerful. But your thinking, your mind is an automatic computer that thinks and processes all the time. And one of its greatest, it's a powerful computer. It's like that HAL 9000 in the Space Odyssey movie. And it's a powerful thing. One of the downsides is that it thinks and processes all the time. You can't turn it off. Well, I can't say you can't. Through meditation and other things, I've learned to tone it down a lot. And there are masters of meditation that are seeking to quiet the mind down so much that they can have a direct experience of reality without any pre-processing, without any judgment, without any opinions. And I can honestly say I've had some of those moments. I've achieved them through meditation. It's an incredible experience. It's something that I can share with you some other time in more detail, but it's amazing. It can be done. It doesn't last for very long for me, and not for some people can make it last for a very long time. And it's an incredible experience. It's an unadulterated experience of what is really happening. It's an incredible thing to experience. Doesn't necessarily make you a better person or anything, but it's an interesting thing to be able to do that. So you can quiet down the mind, but for most of us that's almost impossible. But so how is it that you choose your own behavior? The power of choice is useless if you're always making your choices based on how you feel and your broken feelings and your broken thinking. That's not a choice. You're being subjugated by your thinking and feeling, which is limited. So you have no choice. The alternative is to become the observer of your own thinking and feeling. And then, in spite of your own thinking and feeling, make choices and behaviors that are supporting you and where you want to end up. You're truly living the life that you want to live. And hopefully for the men in this room, it's a life that is dictated by the love of Christ. So, and the obvious examples are marriage relationships where people just, for whatever reason, they come and they fall out of love with each other. Love for each other is a process. You can decide to change the whole nature of the relationship. If you have the cooperation of the other person, it helps. But you can even do it without their cooperation. That's even more powerful. So the key to this whole thing of mastering your life, to making decisions that are truly free choice decisions, is to be able to be the observer of your own thinking and your own feeling, and compare that thinking and feeling to a master plan that you're working on. And that plan can change, but compare it to, for example, the behavior of Christ, or these simple rules I gave you here. Is what I'm thinking and want to do, does it bring life or death? Oh, death. Well, I guess I shouldn't do that. I'd love to do it, but I guess can't. That's the Jesus within me. I'm not forgiving someone because I feel like it. I'm forgiving it because Christ told me to value in forgiveness. And after you keep doing it over and over again, then it feels good to forgive, and it's no problem. Then so forgive yourself and forgive others. Do what brings life and what brings death. So if you just use these things as guideposts, then you don't. It's powerful, and like I say, all those things come from the Bible. But what I want to share with you is just that simple fact that the real power and freedom of choice lies within you becoming the observer of your own thinking and feeling. And here's the beauty of this. There is no other perspective from which you can observe your own thinking and feeling unless you are observing it from the perspective of your spirit. So what I'm saying to you is that when you disconnect, in a way, manner of speaking, from your own thinking and your own feeling, you are putting yourself with intention into the spiritual realm. And the spiritual realm is not like mind over matter. It's like power. It's where miracles occur. It's where the spirit power is the fuel from which miracles occur. And when we can tap into that power, you could stay awake for 7 days without using any drugs, and it would not affect your thinking. This is the thing that you can go and experience by watching, I'll say, certain masters. When you go, for example, to the Orient, you see these Zen practitioners who are so, they are, in a way, they're tapping into spirit power to do things that we think are impossible. They put a knife against their throat, it doesn't go through. These kind of crazy things that you see that these masters are doing. What they're specifically doing is they're tapping into power. Now that's available to everybody, regardless of their beliefs, and that is why it's important, I'll say in this room, for us to be Christians, because you can take that same power and choose to do negative with it. You could actually choose to say, when you meditate yourself into a state where you no longer are subjugated to your own feelings, I can tell you from experience what happens is you're in another element of power that you didn't know existed before. Now you got real freedom of choice. Then you got to really think, what do I choose? As it's easy for me in that state of mind to do just as much bad as it is good. It's really easy because this is a decision. I choose to do this. So fortunately, I think the men I'm talking to this morning, obviously we're directed in our path through God, and so we're always going to make the positive decision. And so like you see the movie in Star Wars, I say they shouldn't say force, they should say power, because that's what the battle is really about. Darth Vader, he gave in and said, I'm going to take this ability of choice that I have and use it for evil. Made a conscious decision to do it for whatever reason. Whereas we in this room take a power that I'm sharing with you, how to tap into it, and choose to use it for good. And so the real thing about that is a spiritual journey is an inward path. Unfortunately, and I've read the Quran, and it's got some good things in it, but one of the greatest battles we face today that we see unfolding between the two religions of Islam and Christianity is a very simple thing, really. Islam is about imposing your will on everyone else around you in order to make the world a great place. Whereas Christianity and Christ's path is an inward path. Change myself, become better myself so that I can be of service to other people. Big fundamental difference. And that's why those two religions are always going to clash. And you can read it right in the Quran. But if you read it, you'll see why some people are attracted. But one of the great things about it is that if you read it as a Christian, from a Christian perspective, it really does hammer home all the time that a person should be dedicated to God's mission. That's a great thing about the book. But here again, it's a structured list of things in man's words, man attempting to use words to describe God, which is an impossible thing. And then it's really a war of words at the end of that. Their book versus our book. It's just at the ground level, it's just that, a war of words. And you can win that war of words with someone who is in the Islam religion by just simply asking them, what do you do with these verses here in your book, And they may never choose to argue those, because then you start to get into all kinds of conditioning issues, right? We as human beings are conditioned. Your mind and your body is conditioned. And as we get older, I hate to say it, we become more habitual in our thinking, and it becomes harder to unwind the wrong thinking. And so even more important is that first step to unlocking your true power and being a real servant of God is to become aware of your own thinking and feeling. Choose to actually observe it and do it all the time. I try to do it constantly. When I'm talking to people, when I'm interacting, I even go as far as to observe myself as though I'm a third party. How am I sitting? How am I looking? And it doesn't make you perfect to do these things, It just enables you to live the true life at your best potential that you can live. Thank God that our perfect human experience of life doesn't require us to be perfect. That's why we are perfect, because we were designed with these saddles that were, things that are on us, the imperfect human thinking. The perfection comes from overcoming those as best you can. Knowing all this stuff hasn't made me a billionaire, but it has improved my experience of life so that no matter how bad things are, I can still maintain perspective and still be positive and still try to help others even when I'm in desperate need of help myself. Okay? So I just wanted to share that gift with you and these things that I learned when I was in prison. And I put my Right Away Foundation website on there, and I pray that if you guys feel compelled or to want to help these people who are in prison, they're really the worst people in the world. You might as well consider that way, even though they're not. Many of us have been trained to look at it that way. It's a very sad thing because they're just throwaways, a lot of them, and they're being intentionally thrown away. So if you want to donate, I'm looking for donors to donate $5 to $10 a month just to get this thing going, and we're going to do some events in town and anything. So I'm encouraging you to do that, because there's no other worse people than no other people who have been abandoned worse than people we throw away into prisons, from my experience. And when they get out, it doesn't change. There's no second chance. There's no laws out there that really, the second chance is right here. It exists within you guys. Like James hired me when I got out so that I could get out of the halfway house. Thank God for that. He took me out of the halfway house by giving me a job. And I think I owe you money for that. Thank you. Don't worry, it's coming. It's coming.
You'll take it too.
But you guys have the same ability to do the same thing. It's not about giving blind chance to people. It's about doing it in a structured way. But you're empowered to do that. So I encourage you to make that donation, because if I can get in there and get this equipment in there, there is none really. And it's an opportunity to mission to people in there and do something really great. And I also work with groups on the outside too.
Thank you so very much for the presentation.